Longtime Carolina Panthers play-by-play man Mick Mixon called it a career after the 2021-22 season. Although, honestly, calling Mick Mixon a play-by-play guy is a disservice to what he actually did. The dude was a storyteller. Every single Sunday, he would open up a Panthers broadcast with poetry.
An NFL team unsettled at quarterback is like a rock band with no lead singer. Imagine the Rolling Stones with no Jagger, Aerosmith without Tyler. The E Street Band is great, but they come to see Bruce. Well, the Carolina Panthers' Born to Run September has become a 10th Avenue freeze-out. And with 2 more dates left on the concert tour, questions remain about who's going to front this band. Today, Sam Darnold returns to center stage. Rock star or roadie? Let's listen in as Darnold tries to be the boss here in Jungle Land.
Just absolute genius from Mixon, who would do this time and time again. And I sat here and I thought to myself, how is he doing this? A lot of it had to do with his background. A guy who grew up in North Carolina and got an opportunity to tell some incredible stories related to North Carolina sports.
The Triangle has the most unique landscape for sports. 3 major universities along Tobacco Road with rabid fan bases, a Stanley Cup champion, an NFL team right down the road, and heavily invested transplants. Not to mention an interesting mix of sports teams that were. Joe Ovies brings you a brief history of Triangle sports, a candid conversation with those who help shape why sports matters here.
Grew up in Chapel Hill. You went to North Carolina, graduated in 1980. When you graduated and you began your broadcast journey, was the goal always to come back to North Carolina in some form or fashion?
It's actually the opposite. The goal was to not come back because I had grown up in Chapel Hill, and all credit to I love meeting people, Joe, that the military brats, the people that moved around, that's family, because I think that builds a certain psychological hardness and a set of experiences in people. My life was different because it was my memory of my childhood begins with Chapel Hill and then kind of takes me there through college. And so I felt like when I graduated May 11th, 1980, a Saturday, I felt like everywhere I turned, either, here's my whole high school librarian, or here's my swim coach from youth, or here's my Cub Scout leader who I disappointed greatly in a variety of ways. So I wanted to get out of North Carolina and never come back, or at least let some years go by first.
Okay. And that takes you to the main guides. You were play-by-play for minor league baseball.
Fantastic gig. I could fill a medium-sized book and all of your podcasts with R-rated stories not acceptable for most audiences of covering a AAA baseball team in the state of Maine, where no one talked like me, no one looked like me, no one probably even understood me, but I adored it. And, man, what a great Petri dish. I know you've talked to Tony and Tony Rigsby, Tony Haynes, some other people that have done baseball. I know Rigsby's a huge baseball guy. Baseball is the theater where if a young person came to me and said, I want to be a broadcaster, sure, I want to learn how to do play-by-play, I would say go learn the syntax, the storytelling that baseball on radio requires. Get a feel for that, and then you can go anywhere in the world. We can plug you into golf, Olympics, tennis, football, anything, radio, TV. And so I loved minor league baseball.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because, the first episode of this podcast series was with Tony Rigsby, who has been broadcasting for 50 years. And despite the fact that he grew up on Tobacco Road, he is a baseball guy. He is intoxicated by baseball. I kind of get the same sense from you in that time frame where baseball really allows you to tell these stories, which kind of informed the rest of your career.
100%, Joe. You do. So in Maine, I did 140 9-inning baseball games by myself in 160 days. And so you have to figure some things out.
Right.
I mean, how are you going to build the drama, hold the audience? How are you going to fill the time? I mean, when it's 11-2 in the fourth and your team's down 9 and you're on your third or fourth pitcher, but yet you're always told someone's always listening. even when it doesn't feel like it. And I'm sure there'll be moments on this podcast where it'll feel like that to you and to me. But there's always someone listening. So to figure out how to do that and hopefully connect those listeners to the events of these athletes. Man, I loved it and learned so much doing baseball.
So, obviously you're not going to be doing AAA baseball forever. What were you looking to do after? Was it sticking with baseball? Was it going to some other market? And then how did the Tar Heel Sports Network opportunity present itself at the end of the 80s?
Quite by chance, and I'll tell it to you briefly because it's probably boring to even people in my own family, but to me it was kind of cool because when I got to Maine, I was 28 years old and wanted to stay in baseball. So that was my goal, was to try to get to the major leagues if I could doing baseball. My boss, however, Jordan Kobritz, lost the Maine Guides in court. So after my season in Maine, 1987, the Guides became the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Red Barons. I applied for that job, didn't get it, moved back to Columbia, South Carolina, where I had worked at WIS Radio. And then I get a letter out of the blue from Jim Hevner, who ran the Tar Heel Sports Network. And he had listened to one of my shows, one of my talk shows in Columbia after a USC South Carolina game one fall Saturday. Was looking to get off the air, wrote me a letter saying, would you be interested in coming to Chapel Hill, working on the Carolina games, production manager and color analyst with Woody Durham, for those who may not know. And I said, yeah, sure, because I was lame duck, but wanted to get back to baseball.
Sure.
So I moved back to Chapel Hill. But while I'm here, Joe, in Chapel Hill, I'm writing letters I'm sending out tapes. I'm trying to get back to baseball. About 5 weeks after I moved back to Chapel Hill, summer of '89, my parents were killed in a commercial airline crash. My mom and dad died on a DC-10 United Airlines Flight 232 that crashed in a cornfield in Sioux City, Iowa, trying to make an emergency landing when the number 2 engine, the engine in the tail, fell off in mid-flight. That event kind of caused me to lose some of my career focus a little bit because my sister and me, we were kind of orphaned, and we had to, do all the things you do with settling the estate, selling their house. So I kind of lost a little bit of my send out tapes mojo. And while that was going on, I found that I loved being back in Chapel Hill. 10 years had gone by almost. So now I'm back in Chapel Hill and kind of enjoyed renewing some acquaintances and playing golf at Findlay again and following the Tar Heels, and ended up staying in Chapel Hill at UNC for 16 seasons.
Your parents and that plane crash and this job, there's a lot of travel involved. Like John Madden famously did not get on a plane. He had the Madden Cruiser. And I'm not sitting here asking you to relive these traumas, but did that give you pause with continuing your career? Because in order to do what you did, whether it was baseball or the Tar Heels or whatever, it requires a lot of air travel.
Well, my first blush on that was not only did I never want to get on a plane again, I didn't want anybody that I knew or cared about to get on a plane. Part of the frailty of the human mind is that you think, okay, now you think that. So I was tremendously fearful for my sister. I thought, okay, my immediate family was now 4, now it's 2. And now if anything happened to my sister, it'll just be me. And so, but my parents raised my sister and me to be independent and self-reliant. And I felt like after a hot minute of thinking about it and living with it, I thought that summer of '89, Joe, I thought, why compound a tragedy with another tragedy? If I let this control me and my career path, then my parents wouldn't be pleased with that. And then that would be adding one tragedy on top of another. So I put mind control on it and get on planes like I've done and did for I don't know how many years with the NFL and UNC prior to that. But I will confess to you that every time I left the house to go catch a flight, I made my bed. I had everything lined up. I had my underwear, socks just so in the drawer, with that fear in the back of my mind that the next person to put a key in this lock may not be me.
You arrive in Chapel Hill at a pretty fun time. North Carolina wins the national championship in 1993. So you get right there when they've got this run from 1982, when you have just graduated, to actually now being able to be a part of a championship broadcast. So when did it kind of dawn on you, I don't know if it was before 93 or whatnot, that this is actually pretty freaking cool to be in Chapel Hill, to have grown up here. Now you're part of this broadcast. You know how much it means when this team wins, and you're now forever linked to that.
Well, the bigness of Woody himself, working with him was a handful in the best possible way.
Sure.
So I tried to learn how to be. So I'm coming from baseball, where I'd been the play-by-play guy and the color guy and the engineer and everything else, to now working with Woody, where Woody doesn't need any help. He does not need further, his play-by-play did not need any further edification. So the idea that I tried to develop this word economy, the notion to be, let me see if I can serve the broadcast. So I love music. So every musician knows, particularly people that play rhythm instruments, you know that there's this saying called serve the song. Just because you can do a single stroke roll at 850 beats a minute doesn't mean that you should. So cut it in half again,
right.
And try to counterpunch and listen to what Woody said and try to add in little bits and pieces here. Dean Smith was at or near the height of his power. He, and everybody talks about Coach Smith's legendary memory for detail. I grew up in Chapel Hill, but I went to the Dick DiVenzio basketball camp because my dad felt like the Carolina basketball camp was, I don't know, too expensive, or Mickey would he'll be further from home. We can get him to Meredith College, and he likes Dick DiVenzio. So off I go. So when I meet Coach Smith, after I'm hired, and they bring me down to meet Coach Smith, and he's running a summer camp, and they bring him out of a drill, and Coach, here's Mick Mixon, your new color analyst on the network. He goes, "Oh, Mick, you're from Chapel Hill?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "I don't remember you from my camp. Where did you go to camp?" And I went, "Well, Coach, look at the time. I got to be going." So, I start already on a slippery slide with Coach Smith. But Mac Brown Joe had just gone 1-10.
Yeah.
So my first season in Chapel Hill was the second of the 1-10s, and then came the 1990 UNC team, a 6-4-1 team that was one of my favorite teams that I've ever covered. I mean, that team tied Georgia Tech, that would win the national championship, goal line stand in Chapel Hill. I got chills right now just thinking about the end zone to our right as we sit in the press box. That Tar Heels had this goal line stand. Georgia Tech had it first and goal from the 1.
Yeah.
Didn't get in. There's a 10-10, I believe it was, tie. That team then set the foundation for some excellent teams under Mac Brown. Meanwhile, the Tar Heels are rolling in basketball. So it was a magical time. And I'm much older than you. You'll appreciate this more as you age. But things tend to romanticize things in your life, particularly in athletics, that happened when you were younger.
Yeah.
You do that when you get older. Back then, oh my golly, I mean, who the Tar Heels recruited, who Duke had signed, who State was signing, Wake Forest with their the Euro connection, the Tim Duncans. I mean, these things seemed like the most important events in my life back then. And so, man, it was a blast, a great time to not only be in Chapel Hill, but covering the ACC.
So I want to circle back, go through these things one by one. So you're with the broadcast crew, with Woody Durham, and we at the Fan, we've developed a wonderful relationship with Wes. And anytime Wes is around, there's always some sort of conversation that comes back to his dad, Woody. And you taught too. You were teaching at UNC as well in media. But I am curious, as somebody you teach, but you're also absorbing. There's one thing I've always been fascinated by with you, is that you have an ability to absorb information or be curious enough to go get the information and then present it. So what did you learn from working with Woody that eventually kind of informed what you did with the Panthers?
Yeah, a couple things that I learned from Woody, and thank you for your words, Joe. I appreciate that. It means a lot coming from you. Woody, I learned from Woody that the broadcast has to have and he believed in journalistic balance. Now, that may sound, there may be people listening to us now going, whoa, wait a second. Did Mick just say that Woody brought journalistic balance to a broadcast?
Yeah.
But he did.
Yeah.
And how he did it was everybody knew that he was the voice of the Tar Heels. So no questions asked. His loyalty to UNC was unassailable and absolute. But he also had a pretty excited vocal register that he would use to describe a Junior Burrow dunk follow, a Cherokee Parks rebound and a putback, and then he's fouled and will go to the line. A Phillip Rivers touchdown pass, a Randolph Childers 3 from long range. He, unlike some other broadcasters that viewed the other team doing something as this gut punch that should not really be fully articulated in an exciting way, Woody didn't do it that way.
Sure.
And occasionally he'd be criticized for sounding excited and being excited when the other team did something predatory to the Tar Heels, corrosive to UNC. But Woody believed that these athletes, these coaches, the game deserved that. The history of the league deserved that.
It's exciting, too. You know, if you're in a back and forth football-wise with NC State, you mentioned Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers doing what Phillip Rivers did and obviously going on to have a Hall of Fame career. Yes, you should be registering that what you're witnessing as a fan, whether you like the other team or not, you go because it's so exciting. It's part of the story. So, yes, I'm in total agreement with you in relation to how Woody always made sure that he presented an entertaining broadcast, not just a one-sided broadcast. But you get to be in a unique position. Both you and Woody were in a unique position where you get to be around the coaches all the time. So this is kind of like an interesting progression of Carolina basketball that you were a part of. You're kind of a unique part of the fabric that connects a retirement or a championship, a retirement, an interesting 3 years where they go to 2 Final Fours, a coaching search that ends with Matt Doherty, and then Roy's return, which, of course, you were part of that broadcast in 2005 when the whole thing, the whole goal came to fruition with the national championship. So I want to start with Dean. Getting ready for a broadcast, being around practice and getting ready for matchups and what you were going to do. What was it like being around Dean Smith?
Well, it was great, but it was also terrible.
Okay.
Stressful. Coach Smith had this kind of, let me see how I can describe it. He built a program that was so internally focused. In other words, the players and the managers and the coaches and the staff, they were this crucible of Carolina basketball, and it was a closed shop. Didn't matter whether you were Woody Durham or John Swafford or Joe or Adam or Mick or whomever.
Yeah.
You could get close. You could listen in. You could get your ear on the chest of this beast and hear its heartbeat, but you weren't really gonna be a full part of it. That's just the way it was.
Okay.
So long as you understood that and respected it, and you could coexist. And then I found that if you were okay with that, if you demonstrated that you understood that the team bus doesn't wait for broadcasters, that championship rings for the most part go to these people, not to the people who covered the team. If you can get accustomed with the fact that to the media, you're going to be viewed as staff. To the staff, you're going to be viewed as media.
Interesting.
So you're in this little netherworld of, okay, there's the media over there. They have their job. Here's the staff over here. That looks like fun. And you got one foot in both.
Yeah.
Then certain doors would open up over time.
Okay.
Seats on team planes, invitations to dinner on the road, golf. They need a foursome. You end up getting a call.
Was that a level of trust that had to be built over time?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. And I think that's just kind of the way Coach Smith ran with it and what he believed was best. So whenever I would see, one time I come down the hall of the Smith Center, I remember I had a Rasheed Wallace or a Dante Calabria interview I had to get to. I come down the back stairs of the Smith Center, Joe, and I run into Coach Smith. And he looks up at me and he goes, "Oh, Coach Mixon." Okay, so what do we now know? What can we infer from that? Dean Smith has never called me Coach Mixon before. What we can infer is, and you don't have to be Matlock to figure this out.
Yeah.
Somebody told him that I said something on the air, criticized whether this odd front zone was really working. Maybe they should go back to the man-to-man.
Yep.
It was probably his son, Scott Smith, but maybe someone else, maybe Lou Vine or somebody told him that I had said that. Mm-hmm. So now Coach says, Coach Mixon, how are you? By the way, how many games have you won?
Interesting.
So it crossed my mind to say, well, I haven't won any, but neither have I let an 8-point lead slip away in the last 45 seconds either, which might have just recently happened. Woody and I had keys to the Smith Center because the memorabilia room in the Dome of Dean was where our broadcast studio was.
Gotcha.
And so about 11 o'clock at night, I'm coming in, rainy night, and I'm coming in to do some production work. And I'm putting my key, I'm fumbling for my key. I just have my key out, and I'm just putting it in the door of the Smith Center. Mm-hmm. And on the other side of the door, in a leather trench coat and a briefcase, is Dean Smith. So he's coming out right as I'm coming in. Mm-hmm. And he looks at me, and I try to hide the key. I try to kind of instinctively whip it around behind my back, but he sees it. And he looks into my soul, and he says, "Oh, Mick, they gave you a key?"
So he gave you shit.
Oh, he could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you had to hang loose. No, you had to have.
But in a way, because the way I've always interpreted these types of things, and it's kind of the way I was brought up, if somebody's willing to give you shit, they like you. There's a level of acceptance there. They know you can kind of take it, maybe.
Love it. Yeah.
Okay, because in my world, if I'm not willing to give you a hard time or where there's no teasing going on, it almost feels like I don't mess with you, so I'm not even going to bother. But if I'm there, there's clearly a level of respect.
I think that was Coach.
Yeah.
And as part of my philosophy of life, health, happiness, and success, keys to the kingdom is interpret all data.
Yes.
In whatever way is most favorable to me.
And that would be the way to go about it. But it is funny what the coach Mick story solidifies something that's always been told to me, because I got started in this business later, when I graduated from NC State, and I always heard, hey, they pay attention at Carolina. Hey, the famous Dean Smith, all the clippings and everything else. And that extended itself to Roy Williams, who's a Dean Smith guy. Gilio and I went to do this podcast kind of recapping Roy Williams' career. He was gracious with his time. And we went into his new office, and there was newspaper clippings everywhere. Boxes of newspapers, remembering everything else. Of course, at the time, what he was looking at was some charity golf tournament that he sunk this pot that he was really excited about. So that didn't affect you, though, did it? That didn't affect you and Woody in terms of how you were going to be as objective as you possibly could to do the broadcast, knowing that somebody is listening.
No, you can't let it affect you in that way.
Okay.
I would rather fly commercially. I'd rather not be allowed to go to practice. I'd rather it be difficult for me to get the access and still feel like we can lay our head on the pillow at night and say we didn't turn fan. We told the story. We tried to broadcast the game as in an accurate and as fair a way as we could. But Coach Smith was great and treated me well. He did have that needle he could get out, but that was universal. Anybody that knew him could tell that story. He did tell me one time, he said, Mick, if you have any questions, any basketball questions, then feel free. Mm-hmm. And I did. I had quite a few and always enjoyed. Now his answers could be, one time I said, Coach, could a team have one guard, one ball handler whose ball handling skill was so great that he could render a team not pressable? Mm-hmm. I thought that was a good question.
Sure.
He goes, Bogues. So his one-word answer
that's it.
Was Bogues, Muggsy Bogues.
That's it. Okay.
That was it.
Didn't want to explain anything?
One time I said, Coach, if a team could run the Princeton offense and recruit into it, mm-hmm. and he goes, the National.
That's it.
That's it. They'd win the national championship. So you kind of got to fill in the blanks because Coach Smith was a decorated minimalist.
Yeah, interesting. And for our line of work, that could be very, very difficult, for sure. Were you surprised with the way that he retired? in 97?
I don't know, Joe. A little. I mean, it felt so awkward with the coaching search and the insistence on having it be a quote unquote a member of the family, a Carolina man, and not so much the handoff to Guthridge, but I'm talking about sort of the post Guthridge.
The Guthridge thing, in hindsight, always made sense. He was taking care of his guy.
Oh, that was black letter law, and I think.
Yeah.
I mean, people know more about this than me that have written about this and covered it, but it seemed to me as though the timing of Coach's retirement announcement and decision, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed as though it left UNC with not many other options. Not that they would have explored him anyway, because at that time, Dean Smith was the most powerful man in the state of North Carolina, more so than probably any governor, senator.
That always seemed to be like it was going to be the plan, and I guess that's what, people kind of had the same idea on April 1st of, 2021 when Roy Williams finally decided to retire. It was kind of not quite putting Carolina in a position where they couldn't go out and get somebody else, but it was like, look, Hubert's going to be the guy in the same way that Gut was going to be the guy, taking care of your guys in a sort of way. So, but from your perspective, you have to – fans are clearly interested in who the next coach is going to be because they want sustained success. They want to be on top and everything else. But you have to look at it from a different perspective because you're working with these people going forward. So was it the relationship change? I mean, Bill Guthridge has been around for a long time, but now that he's in the head coach position and you're in the broadcast, did it kind of change any sort of dynamics for you?
Not that many that I remember. Coach Guthridge had he the way he ran things was very Dean Smith-like.
Sure.
So not much change there. That was an interesting time, though, at UNC, Joe, because North Carolina in that window of time goes from Mack Brown, John Swafford, Dean Smith to Bill Guthridge, Dick Bedour, Carl Torbush.
Right.
And it was it was a challenging several years there, I think, for UNC. Michael Hooker, the chancellor, was a fantastic, big personality. I mean, ready, fire, aim. Had a take on everything. You would have loved to interview him if you could have. We had him on at halftime a time or two. James Measer was more measured.
Sure.
So it was an interesting time at UNC back then to kind of just be a part of it and looking at it from a distance.
And you talk about that machine, but Mack Brown, he's back now. But at the time in 1997 when they were knocking on the door, I mean, I was a student in 1997. And I went to that Carolina-Florida State game because Kelly, who was my wife, was a student at UNC. So she was in the band, so she gave me at that point, growing up in South Florida, I just liked big football. I'd seen the Hurricanes and everything else. I wanted to see a big football game. This was it. I mean, it's the old Bull Alliance, right? North Carolina's knocking on the door, and Florida State comes to town, takes care of business. That was for me a fun atmosphere. But did you, when Texas came calling for Mack Brown, do you think that there was ever a possibility that Mack Brown would have stuck at UNC if basketball wasn't such the power that it was in the 80s?
The dreaded hypothetical question. What is wrong with you? You're trying to – I guess you can't get me fired because I'm already
No, you're
retired.
free – Mick, you can say whatever you want. You are unbothered now.
I guess. Well, hypotheticals like that are difficult. I do believe that William Mack Brown wanted to, going back from when he was at Tulane, going back from when he was in the North Carolina Mountains coaching, going back to when he, somewhere in Cookeville, Tennessee, decided he wanted to coach. I believe that he wanted his resume, his epitaph, his tombstone to say, here lies one of the great football coaches in history.
Sure.
And now he would have to judge or speak on whether he felt like he could get there at UNC. Could he have taken UNC to the national championship? He was recruiting. He had the relationships with every high school coach in the state.
Your dog wants to say hello.
Jazz wants to walk all over your equipment.
It's fine. It's fine. As long as the dog doesn't hit the big red button, we're fine. But I can always restart it and edit it.
Lie down. I think that Coach Brown, when Texas came calling, I think, to try to answer your question, I think that if he would have stayed at North Carolina, if he could have been convinced to stay, and I doubt that, I don't think that could have happened.
Okay.
Because it's Texas. we know how big things are.
Yeah, I mean,
Texas.
yeah, Texas is, look, that's a primo job with recruiting. We know Mac Brown loves recruiting. You've got all this base there. But I always did wonder, it's not like Carolina ever lacked money.
I know,
or
but
want
I think
to
he
on
would have
things.
needed certain concessions would have had to have happened.
Okay.
So let's just call it for what it is. Chapel Hill, Keenan Stadium, this beautiful pastoral setting where it's in a natural valley. You don't even know there's a stadium until you come up over the trees and see, oh my God, there's a football stadium down there. Not really expandable in a Death Valley, Clemson, Texas, Florida State kind of sense.
Yeah.
North Carolina also, because of this, how it's evolved, has this relationship between academia, the town of Chapel Hill, and the university and athletics. So you remember there was the whole parking thing. Oh, wait a second. We can't have Tar Heel Town in the quad because the roots of these trees are getting compacted by having Doug Clark in the hot nuts set up and play. But yet to someone like Mac Brown, he might think, well, what do you want? Do you want to have who cares about the roots of the trees if we're trying to bring a national, do you realize ESPN Sports Center, the game day, you realize that Chris Fowler and Lee Corso, those are there, and they're there because of some of what we've done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at the hospital and the dynamic of the hospital that played for the lack of Thursday night football games.
I know.
Which was a huge TV opportunity before the NFL took over Thursday nights. But I remember it was a big deal when North Carolina, I remember talking over to people at UNC about it, like, why don't you do this? It's like, well, traffic, parking, and the hospital. It's a functioning hospital next door to us. So
I know.
It made it difficult.
At Michigan, they park cars on the 18th fairway of the university golf course.
They would never at Findlay.
No.
They would never do that at Findlay, ever.
Yeah, so I guarantee you when he went to Texas, it was probably, whatever
what do you need? What do you need? So let's fast forward to 2005. Roy Williams comes back. Has to kind of clean up, and Gilio and I have always made this point about Roy Williams and his return. You could argue that he saved Carolina basketball by repairing a lot of relationships. Working with Roy when he first got there, coming over from Kansas and the immediate stress that he was already placed in. How was he to work with, though, in that brief amount of time that you were there? Oh,
really good, Joe. And I think what I saw in Coach Williams was this, and I kind of felt for him in those early weeks and months because, I mean, what a difficult thing, the loyalty, because he comes from the Dean, so he's a branch of Coach Smith.
He was in that dynamic that you talked about earlier.
Right.
He was in.
Loyalty is the number one law of physics. So he's loyal to Kansas. Kansas gave him his shot.
Yeah.
But yet he feels the pull to come back. And so people would come up to him and say, welcome home, Roy. Mm-hmm. And he would want to, and that would make him uncomfortable. He would say, well, thank you, but Kansas was also my home. So I think for a while, it took a while, almost like that. Remember that game, Etch-a-Sketch? Are you old enough to remember that?
Yeah.
Where you shake it up to get all the marks off and start all over. I think it took a while for him to kind of hit that sort of reset button and get comfortable, totally comfortable with, and trust that people understand. People know, sure, Coach, you were at Kansas. You did great things there. You owe them a debt you feel like you'll never be able to repay. Now you're the UNC head coach. But working with him was incredible. We didn't have a lot of interaction, but interviewing him a time or two and just watching him, the intensity with which he coached.
2005 national championship happens. In going back and looking over things, I have a picture of you and Adam Gold in the Smith Center for the celebration. You've got a championship hat on. You know, the Smith Center is crowded for the celebration because Roy finally got it done, and all this kind of comes together. In that moment, or when things kind of settled down after the national championship, was there an assessment of what you wanted to do next, or was it just kind of like, you know what? I've been doing this now since I came back to Chapel Hill. I love it here. You're kind of part of this fabric now, and this is where I'm going to be for a while. Was that kind of a frame of mind at that point?
No, January of 2005. So while that national championship basketball season's going on, the Panthers had reached out to me and some others, and the interview process for the Panthers play-by-play job was underway.
Yep.
I had been to Charlotte about 4 or 5 times for day-long in-person interviews.
Okay.
Long process. Glaciers move down continents faster than the Carolina Panthers make what they view as key personnel decisions.
Because I'm trying to remember, when were you announced as the next play-by-play guy?
Right before, it was kind of during that somewhere in mid to late March.
So it was mid to late March.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
so I have my timeline. I have my timeline wrong.
Yeah, so I already knew that April 4th or 5th, whatever it was, in St. Louis, I already knew that was going to be my last game.
Got it.
And that I'd be going to the Panthers.
Okay.
So I've never told anybody this before, not that anybody cares, but you asked me about Roy Williams.
Mm-hmm.
So my buddy Art Shansky had a going away party for me to leave Chapel Hill in April. I think it was in April.
Sure.
At Art's house in Chapel Hill. And I didn't know who he was going to invite or anything. But we're at this party, and Roy and Rhonda Williams come. And Coach Williams reached into his pocket and said, he said, Mick, it's going to be a great shot for you. Congratulations. We'll miss you. And he reached into his pocket and he handed me a national championship ring with my name on it.
Tying back to separation with rings and everything else with Dean Smith, that had to be a moment.
It was. It probably wasn't April because they wouldn't have had them made by then. It must have been a party. Must have been May or June.
Sure.
It took me a while that summer to get my stuff packed up. But that night that Coach Williams did that, he didn't have to do that. But that let me know that somehow or another I'd crossed the blood-brain barrier. I'd passed through media, and just for maybe a minute I felt more like a member of the UNC family then than at any time previously.
So you leave when you feel like you're accepted, and you go and take the Panthers gig. The first biggest difference upon having been in a college town, calling a variety of things, because you weren't just doing football, you just weren't doing basketball, you're also doing baseball play-by-play at that time too, which I knew you loved. But now you're singularly focused on the Panthers. This is a professional organization. You're dealing with men, not just college kids, which is a different demeanor. So what was the big learning curve for you?
First thing I noticed right away was that all the ACC rivalries sort of evaporated in my world.
Mm-hmm.
So for a lot of my life, it mattered to people whether you rooted for Clemson or the Gamecocks. They would brace you up against the wall at a Rotary Club when I lived in Columbia.
I
want to know.
I bet.
In Chapel Hill, Woody used to get upset with me because he thought that the quality of my life was not affected negatively enough when the Tar Heels lost games. But now in Charlotte with the Panthers, we have ECU fans, we have Wake fans, Duke, State, Wofford, PC, Newberry, everybody come. Now your team might have suffered a disappointing loss on Saturday, but the Panthers are playing on Sunday.
Yeah.
And so to see the sociology of that was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very cool. The next big thing was that I was sliding over 24 inches or so from the color analyst chair to the play-by-play chair. The color analyst on the radio gets to see a better game.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to watch the ball. You shouldn't watch the ball.
There's books about, if you want to learn the game, keep your eye off the ball.
Yeah, don't be a ball watcher.
Yes.
Exactly. So, but I threw my whole heart into it and hopefully did an okay job describing the game from a play-by-play standpoint. And Mr. Richardson was quite interesting to work with when he was at his reign of terror.
Yeah.
And I say that in a respectful way. I'm not talking about things that happened that were sad at the end of his career that dinged his legacy up. But back then he was so powerful in and out of the building that, but he, for some reason, he sort of took a liking to me, and we got along great.
So I had to refresh my memory, so I had to pull my phone out to look at particular dates here. You know, you go from what was the height of UNC, coming off a national championship. The Panthers under Jake Delhomme had just played in a Super Bowl in 2003,
right?
And we know I don't want to pick at scabs for the Panthers fans in the audience of what happened in Houston that day, and there are a lot of scabs of what happened that day. So you were kind of part of I don't want to quite call it a rebuild, but they were moving on from the Jake Delhomme era and trying to find that next guy. So there were some lean years in there.
There were, but first came the 2005 season.
Yes.
So my first season in Charlotte with the Carolina Panthers, the Panthers get to the playoffs, go to New York, and with the Meadowlands jam-packed, and I mean, imagine an outdoor Cameron Indoor Stadium, Reynolds Coliseum, Carmichael Auditorium. That was the Meadowlands that day.
Yeah.
And the Panthers played them right off their feet.
Right.
Then Carolina goes to Chicago, and Soldier Field is off the chain. The music, their secondary was great. Their defense was great. Jake Delhomme, Steve Smith, Vegematic, sliced, diced, played them right off their feet. This sent the Panthers to the NFC Championship game in Seattle.
Yeah.
And the Panthers were just about out of gas. Seattle was great. They had it humming.
Jake Delhomme completed his first 2 passes to the Seahawks. The 2 interceptions matches Delhomme's postseason career total. Now the Hawks cash in the gifts for 10 points, 17-0. They also did a tremendous job defensively stopping Steve Smith. They had linebackers cheat down. They had corners right in his face, and they had safeties to cover over the top. Steve Smith, a miserable night.
You know, they did a good job, double, triple, quadruple. You know, they schemed me pretty good, and then, it worked to a T.
The Panthers offense just 62 yards in the first half. They still have a working margin of 17-7 in the third, but Seattle rides the Pro Bowlers to an opening drive touchdown. Sean Alexander, 132 yards on the day. Matt Hasselbeck up top to Darnell Jackson. It is out of reach and on to Detroit. Seattle 34, Panthers 14. Could you think of a worst-case scenario to happen in the first quarter?
No. I mean, they did what they had to do to keep this crowd into it, and definitely gave them momentum throughout the game.
When you come this far and you lose, it's hard to look at the positives, and there were a lot. They're hard to talk about right now. You know, it's just because you're so close and you don't get these opportunities. I mean, to get to a championship game, that's the hardest part.
But that was sort of fun. So you mentioned some of those lean years, and there were some.
There were,
but they were preceded by an 2005 Panther team that was really inspirational and fun to cover.
When did you start developing? And Adam Gold and I have always had fun with these, and we've played them a bunch of times on the radio. When did you develop or begin to develop the pregame, the preamble, the setting, the scene, the poetry that you would drop on the radio?
Well, I've always believed that it's not good enough, it's not acceptable if you carry a microphone around for a living. It's not acceptable to just meatball it at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't believe in that. I believe that when you first come on the air, you ought to have a plan of why the next 3 hours in a football game are going to be important.
Yeah.
And it makes me want to punch broadcasters in the throat that appear to me not to have given much thought to the beginning of the game.
Okay.
It's just not good enough to say, hello, everybody, or
you're looking live.
You're looking live.
It's
It's just an insult to the hours these coaches put in, the sacrifices these players make, how people save and scrimp and to buy PSLs, and how important these games are to such a variety of people. To just come on the air and not have given a little bit of thought to where's the significant action going to be? Why should you listen? And so I've always tried to do it. The broadcast didn't start kind of making a place for it until my second year. My first year, Jim Szoke would would say, so the Panthers won the toss, and now for the play-by-play story, here's the voice of the Panthers,
right.
Mick Mixon.
Yeah.
But I would still do it then. I always did it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think after the second season, when our executive producer, David Langton, saw that I kind of like to sort of set the scene there and do a short little 20, 25-second little setup, he put a little bit of music under it and put a few production elements around it to make it even more fun for me.
A Super Bowl quality first half propels the Panthers to just one game shy of the big game. However, it's that second half performance which somewhat sullied what was otherwise a phenomenal day in the Queen City.
I wanted to be more aggressive. I wanted to just continue to try and attack, but we got into, for whatever reason, we got into protect mode, which I'm a little disappointed in.
You want to continue to keep your aggression and all that, but it's hard. You don't want to do anything silly. You don't want to make any, take a big chance and give up a big play. So it's a fine line.
We just got to get that killer instinct. We've been known to, kind of let the foot off the throttle.
We're not going to sit here and pout about them scoring some points. I mean, this is National Football League. It's a divisional round of playoffs. The team is here for a reason. But at the end of the day, we came away with the victory.
And because of that, Carolina now sails into uncharted waters without ever departing their home dock.
Have we ever hosted an NFC Championship?
No, meaning next Sunday will mark another watershed moment for a team that's already shattered franchise records, including an unprecedented 16 wins in a single season.
To get something that you never got, you got to do something that you've never done. And for us, we've never had that vibe in the streets of Charlotte, and I expect nothing less than what we saw today.
That final hurdle to clear? The Arizona Cardinals. That matchup will take place next Sunday at 6:40, a game you can catch on Fox 50. Jared Fialco, WRAL Sports, Charlotte.
Do you think, and I guess it does tie back to, I guess it's a 10-year gap from 2005 when you first get there, and they're in the NFC Championship game. They run out of gas against Seattle. And I guess that kind of ties to, setting the scene, because I'm pretty sure the one you did ahead of the 2015 NFC Championship game was like this. It was like an epic, because they knocked on the door before, and what was different from 05 versus 2015 was that team ruled in 2014, 2015. That was a phenomenon with Cam Newton, and it was almost like you can't come this far only to just get stopped again. You got to get to the Super Bowl. So I'm guessing, I feel like all of that kind of came to a head when you put that together.
I guess so. I don't really know. I mean, people have asked me about these over the years, and I'm flattered that people assign any kind of value. Adam Gold got all up on AG. He would have me on his show, and he would write one that he
wanted to impress you, Mick. He wanted to impress you. I quit. I couldn't do it.
Oh, man.
I just, I tried doing that every once in a while, but Adam really wanted to impress you when we bring you on.
That was so fun. I don't remember the Arizona. I remember that game, of course, and oh man. I mean, that was really even more so than the Super Bowl, and I loved that Super Bowl with Lady Gaga singing the national anthem, the Blue Angels flying over and all that. But to host an NFC Championship game and win it, there's nothing like that feeling.
So you mentioned the Smith Center, Carmichael, Reynolds, Cameron. We take it as a point of pride in the Triangle. These are buildings that no place is going to get louder, especially for a rivalry basketball game. No place is going to get louder. Did Bank of America Stadium give it a run? Did it surpass?
Oh, yeah. I feel this in my core, Joe, that it's not the fans' responsibility to raise the level of the team.
Mm-hmm.
It's great if it happens.
Sure.
And Cameron's a place. We've mentioned other places where it happens. But it's the Panthers' responsibility to put a product on the field that fans want to be a part of.
That team certainly had it.
Exactly. And my strident belief is that when the Panthers are good, and they'll be good again, that is some of the best fans in the NFL. Now, we haven't had the Super Bowls, the Steelers, Eagles travel, the Patriots travel. You're going to see a lot of Cowboy jerseys. You're going to see a lot of Troy Aikman jerseys in the stands when Dallas plays at Bank of America Stadium. But that's going to change when the Panthers bring absolute victory to Uptown Charlotte and to the Carolinas.
If Lauren Brownlow is listening to this and she hears you mentioning these fans traveling, she's going to get mad. She's going to get mad.
This is a thing for her?
Oh, it's very much a thing for her. She doesn't believe. It's like, these people live here. They're not traveling. Stop it. There's transplants.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point.
No, and but because Lauren feels it with the Panthers. She truly,
it's personal to her.
It's very personal to her.
But I love Lauren Brownlow, by the way. She was in my class.
And the reason why I'm bringing Brownlow into the conversation is because that squad that went to the Super Bowl, and even I got caught up on this, and I have young kids, and they were kind of part of that too, because I'm convinced that team got people to love the Panthers in a way that they hadn't before. Panthers had been here a while, and they've had some success, obviously. But I think that team, everybody, I'm not just talking about Cam Newton, that team got people to love them. And that's what might lead to some of the frustration you're seeing now.
You had the swag. I mean,
yes.
It reminded me of 92 Duke.
Okay.
Where they're rock stars.
Mm-hmm.
Where if Leitner had been 6'2", he still would have been all ACC.
Sure.
He just had the skill. And we could go on and on. That 2015 Panther team with Cam Newton, with Greg Olson and Ryan Khalil and Thomas Davis and Luke Kuechly,
mm-hmm.
and then some veterans on that team. Jericho Cotchery was
mm-hmm.
on that team. Mike Tolbert was on that team. It was such an interesting mix of young, old, huge personalities.
Riverboat Ron.
Coach Rivera, exactly. And it almost worked.
Yeah. Yeah. It almost worked. Do you think that maybe Cam's return this past season kick-started the true appreciation for what that time was for the Carolina Panthers organization?
100%, 1,000%. Don't you? I mean,
I know. I had, and again, this is where having done this for a long time, you stop. I don't want to say you stop feeling it, but you become a little bit more objective about things over time. And what you're looking for is what's entertaining for the show. What's a good storyline, those types of things, right? Win or loss. When Cam Newton came back and he suited up and they called that play at the goal line and he scores and he screams, "I'm back," I literally got up off the couch and yelled because all that 2015 feeling came back.
He's back, all right. First two snaps of the game for Cam Newton turned into the first two touchdowns for the Carolina Panthers en route to a 34-10 rout of the Arizona Cardinals.
In this morning's devotion, I was reading about Moses, and God spoke to Moses in the desert. Where we at?
Red Sea.
You know what I'm saying? This is the last college game that I played. This was the stadium I played it at. This was the first NFL game I played at, and for me to come back, it was somewhat. You can't. It's crazy. God working in my life right now, and I ain't hiding away from it.
And I feel like all the noise about Cam's exit, or the Superman poses, the dabs, all that stuff, I think all that kind of went out the window because it brought back all that fun for it. People actually started to that was fun. That swag that you talked about.
When he came out for the Washington game.
Yeah.
So after the histrionics you're describing
at Arizona, right?
The Panthers host the greatly detested Washington football team.
Right.
With Coach Ron Rivera.
Right.
And in they come. And I had relatives, cousins, former roommates in college, people I hadn't talked to in 20 years, hit me up for tickets.
Mm-hmm.
For a Panther team that's not winning, not going anywhere, going nowhere in a big hurry, but Cam Newton's going to start the game.
Yeah.
And it was must-see football for a lot of people. When he came out into the smoke, stood in the middle of those pyrotechnics,
mm-hmm.
did the Superman, the spread of the revealing that red S, the imaginary red
Yes.
S. I'm in a full body chill bump in the press box. I thought I could start crying right here, right now.
Hey, look,
the emotion of it all.
I kind of felt that with the touchdown, and I was kicking myself because that was a weekend that I had identified through StubHub of, here's a cheap ticket to go take the kids. You know, I always try to take the kids to at least one Panther game, right? And Kelly loves going out to an NFL game. And we've seen some bad games, you know, at Bank of America, but it's whatever. It's about the ritual of going to a game. And I kicked myself when Cam Newton re-signed. I went, oh, wait, this means, let me go back and look. The ticket prices were untenable. I could not. I was so mad at myself for not being there for that game.
Cam was so different too, Joe. He would have, like you said, a lot of the layers had kind of skinned over his privacy, his big kid. Cam was mercurial.
Sure.
You know, you love him, you adore him, you admire him, but then you get mad at him because you see him he doesn't take his hoodie off for a press conference after the Super Bowl. I mean, there's a lot of haters, a lot of lovers.
Sure.
That's just the way it is. But when he came back, he was so different. I mean, humble and accessible and open and just an open book on how he felt about things. And
so it wasn't like that. Wasn't like that before?
Not as much. I mean, he'd show a little bit of it here and there, but just the appreciation that, to me, the way I read it was just the appreciation he has for football, why he loves the game, his teammates, the brevity of NFL careers was all on display. It's just a shame that it couldn't have resulted in some more wins.
Yeah, it is a shame that it didn't even come to a Super Bowl, because I do think had they won in San Francisco against the Denver Broncos, despite the fact that it was a short career, it's a Hall of Fame career.
And had the Panthers won that, again, hypotheticals I hate, but here I am going down this into this cul-de-sac.
You did sports talk, right? You did sports talk back in the day. You know what you know what this is about. It's all hypotheticals.
Man, I know. That if the Panthers had won Super Bowl 50, had they figured out what that felt like and how to close that deal, they might have gotten another one or two along the way.
It's the one common thing that you'll hear, that losing a Super Bowl will alter trajectories. Even like look at the Seattle Seahawks. They win a Super Bowl, they go back, but they lose it one play away at the goal line.
Yeah.
And the team was never really the same again. That's why the Buffalo Bills, in my book, will always get a huge amount of credit for going to 4 straight Super Bowls, despite the fact they saw heartbreak every single time.
At that party, at the Super Bowl party, because the thing you don't know is that you're not going to win. You think you're going to win. So there's at the Super Bowl party in this hotel out in California, Joe, there's a 8 or 9 piece horn band, happening band. There's shrimp the size of bananas. There's an ice sculpture that's 8 feet tall. There's the most lavishly catered Super Bowl celebration party. Only it is like a death in the room.
Yeah.
But the band doesn't know. They're kind of clueless. They're, all right, give me a C, give me an A. They don't really realize, okay, I'm just wanting to sort of say, okay, YMCA, you know, the Kool and the Gang. Y'all probably need to just play a little bit of Melissa Moldauer, Midnight at the Oasis, or do something else, because this ain't going to be happening in this crowd.
Working. Right. To wrap this up, a little bit of rapid fire, and then we'll say goodbye. The most enjoyable North Carolina athlete that you watched, covered, were part of with the broadcast.
Superlative questions. I can't stand superlative questions, but I love you, so I'll do the best I can with it. The Tar Heels had an athlete named Omar Brown.
Okay.
Played football on Mac Brown's early teams, and Omar was violent, but yet very intelligent, very layered, very sensitive. I loved his view of things. One time I said to him, Omar, why is it that black people and white people and different types of people seem to be able to get along on an athletic team better than in society at large?
Sure.
This is probably early 90s when we're having this conversation. His response was it touched me so, it was so unbelievably deep and meaningful that right then I sort of decided to myself, Omar Brown, he doesn't know me. Our paths will probably never cross again, but I love this guy. He's my guy.
This is why I ask you per little questions, so I get stories like that, even if you don't like them.
I have a feeling there are more. I'll try to be quicker with my responses.
No, absolutely not. The other thing that I was going to ask you was, you're around Carolina all the time, but was there a Duke coach, or because you talk to these coaches ahead of the broadcasts, you do the opposing coach view and things like that. You're a Carolina broadcast team coming in, but was there anybody that was completely cool or not? It's not the rivalry. It's like, look, we're just having a conversation. They know what you do, you know what they do, and it was just a generally fun conversation.
They were all great. I loved Gary Williams. Always look forward to it.
Yeah.
Dave Odom. Always looked forward to it.
They just want to talk basketball, right?
Herb Sendek did not look forward to it.
Really?
But I did look forward to it.
Wait a minute. Well, all right. Pause. Again, this is why I ask these types of questions. You never know where it's going to go. What do you mean Herb didn't want to do it? He just didn't want to talk?
Well, he tolerated it, but he didn't want to give you anything. So the challenge there was, I respect him so much because he forced you to work harder. The journalistic pablum that we pass off as quote unquote questions, Coach, you have to be concerned about. I mean, that's just bull crap. It's not a question; it's a statement.
Sure.
It assumes something that may not be true. So Coach Sendek made you. I mean, you had to have it coagulated together over there, or else it would not go well for you, the interviewer.
See, I get it though, because it's a bit of a matching of wits with Herb Sendek. He's a smart, cerebral dude.
Carnegie Mellon and all that. Yeah, no doubt. And that was Mike Krzyzewski, when Coach K would tolerate these interviews and he would allow them. I remember going to Duke to interview him one day, a couple days before a UNC Duke game. And I remember thinking, after I asked the perfunctory questions about the matchup and preparation and all that, I remember thinking there's so much more to Mike Krzyzewski than people know. This is probably 94, maybe 95, around in there. I said, Coach K, one more question if I might. As the husband to a wife and as the parent, the father to 3 daughters, have you ever felt a void in your life not having parented a son? And if so, to what degree does coaching fill that for you? But I was a little nervous asking that question because I did not know whether Coach K would receive it in the manner that I had intended it.
Yeah, I get where you're going with it. I would think the same thing, right?
He looked at me up and down as if he was considering dog cussing me, my parents for having me, their parents for having him, and throwing me out of his gym. But that only lasted a second, and he drew in his breath and gave one of the great responses to any question I've ever asked or heard asked. He talked about all the estrogen in his house and what he learned from his wife, Mickey, what he learned from his daughters, what he learned from having the female how the female perspective at home made him a better coach, made him able to understand his players' staff. I mean, it was phenomenal. I loved it. But as it's playing live, the tape is playing live on the night of this game. Woody's got his headphones on. Woody's in game mode. Woody's thinking about, Antoine Jameson and all. Woody don't care about Mike Krzyzewski. I mean, he's thinking like, he's looking at me like, who is this guy? What are you doing? Like Phil Donahue, Oprah, what in the blue hell is going on here? But I just believe that if you got a press pass, then you have to hold yourself to hopefully a slightly higher standard of curiosity, of courage to ask sometimes maybe a non-traditional question.
Yeah, and we'll close with a non-traditional question. Now that you are retired and you have all this time, and we're out here in the middle of Alamance County, you got time to work on an album now.
An album?
Yeah. I fully expect an album from you.
A photo album?
No. A music album.
A music album.
You've put out, have you put out a record?
No. I've written some songs though.
Okay.
I wrote a song called The Like Song years ago at training camp when I was so put off by how the younger generation uses the word like improperly.
Okay.
That I wrote a song called The Like Song.
Okay.
And I really believe the Like Song, if I ever recorded it, could go viral.
It needs to be on TikTok, Mick.
Would you like to hear the first verse of The Like Song?
Can you send me the file?
I haven't recorded it.
You haven't recorded yet? All right. Well, give me the first verse.
So you got to have you got to have that kind of "We Will Rock You"
vibe.
Beat, but
okay,
the song is
it.
more of a rap song.
Okay.
So you got the singer, and then you got like girls 1 and 2. So it goes like this. Like is contagious and it multiplies like rabbits. And once it gets a foothold, it infects your speaking habits. Like means affection or as if or similar to. It is not a substitute for who said what to who. Now, like girl 1. And I was like, yeah. And she was like, what? And I was like, virgin. And she was like, slut. And I was like, when? And she was like, now. And I was like, dieting. And she was like, cow. And I was like, hello. And she was like, whatever. And I was like, are you friends with her? And she was like, never.
Nick, this is a TikTok trend waiting to happen.
3
You're
verses.
sitting on a gold mine. This could get billions of views on TikTok.
Well, I suspected it might.
Thank you for your time. You're the best.
Thank you for your time. Thanks for coming to see me. Home and Home series. I love it.
I love it. Yeah, we'll get you to the studio next.
Appreciate it, Joe.
A brief history of Triangle Sports, sponsored by Copiers Plus, your local office equipment and solutions provider. Take the mystery out of your printing expenses by scheduling your free print audit today at copiers-plus.com.